you? Did you go to school today? Did you have school?
Yes.
Did you have a great day at school? A few years ago, I moved with my kids and their dad to a new community, to a small suburb. We're excited about the move and looking forward to it. But for us as a family of color, as we were thinking about the things we needed to do before we got there, something that was really important was that we needed to take our younger son, who has a severe form of autism, to the police station, because we wanted to make sure that he was not seen as a stranger in the community. Did you get to see your friends?
Yes.
Good. I'm glad you did. I'm glad you had a great day. I miss you. He is a teenager now. He's just a great kid. He is sweet and he's kind, and even though his language is very limited, he's very emotionally expressive. He's very social, likes connecting with people, loves to build, loves to draw, loves to sing and listen to music, and he loves the outdoors. I love you.
I love you, Mom.
Aw, give me a kiss. The fear was that, number one, he wouldn't be assumed to be a resident of the community. That number two, he'd be seen as a threat, as a stranger, as someone who could potentially be violent or cause harm. And none of these things are true. For me as a mother, I had an enormous amount of fear of what could potentially go wrong and the situations that he could be in where he absolutely couldn't protect himself. Being Black and having autism means there's always more to think about. He's already vulnerable because he's a Black male, and he's that much more vulnerable because he's so limited in his ability to communicate and in his ability to regulate his behavior.
Think about your kind of standard police interaction. Everything's based off vocal cues. When you don't have those communicational abilities, that already puts you in a huge barrier. And police officers aren't trained to know how to respond to that. They aren't trained to know, okay, what do I do if I pull over someone who has autism? What do I do if I need to make a traffic stop and they can't speak to me? So all of a sudden, they're left stranded, and that scares them. And when they're scared, we've seen what happens.
I truly believe that law enforcement needs better education, specifically around working with vulnerable communities. There has to be better education. They are community members like anyone else. They have the same rights, they should have the same privileges, and they should have the same sense of safety and protection in the community.
It's not just that there's the risk of additional helplessness because he's a Black male. It's not just because that's a sole isolated factor. You also add the communicational aspect and the fact that he can't verbally respond to the police.
He doesn't understand what they're saying. He doesn't understand what his rights are. How can he protect himself? He doesn't understand what his rights are. If they're asking him questions and he doesn't understand what the questions are or doesn't have the verbal ability to answer, how can he advocate for himself? So we made a conscious effort to bring our son to the police station, to introduce him there to the folks there, let him know who he is, what his limitations are, and what our expectations were for how they treat him in the community. I was pleased that they responded positively to it, but I knew that that couldn't be a justification to let my guard down. Does it feel unfair that families like ours are in situations where we have to advocate for our vulnerable family members like that? Absolutely it does. But the reality of it is, if you're a Black person in this country, you're already aware that that's the added burden that we carry.
What were we just talking about?
Oh, schedule.
Okay, schedule, yeah.
If police are going to be continuing, to be called in to engage with people that have these disabilities and have these challenges, they've got to be better informed about how to do that safely.
Are you having a good day?
I hope that we're making it easier for the next Black boy that comes into that community, that comes into another community, that faces the same sort of unfair scrutiny. And so, my hope is in the long run that each of these are, kind of bricks in the wall.
Bye-bye, Mom.
Oh, I love you. Bye-bye. Real change is going to come through the difficult conversations that I think people are starting to have. Uncomfortable but really important conversations. Black people can't change this. Black people don't own the power structures to change this. This is about acknowledging what's real and making real changes to systems. And that's driven through honest conversation about what's happening.
While the killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor have dominated the news, the deeper story of systemic racism and policing can be found in statistics that reflect everyday interactions like traffic stops. The ABC-owned television station's data journalism team examined millions of traffic and pedestrian stops in more than a dozen American cities and found that Black Americans in big cities across the country were more likely to be stopped and searched by police. In Chicago and San Francisco, Black people were stopped at a rate 4 times higher than white people. In Los Angeles and Philadelphia, it was 3 times more likely. And in New York, where police stops are mostly of pedestrians, the city's Black residents were 8 times more likely to be stopped by the police, and they were more likely to be searched as well. In Houston, while traffic stop rates were about equal between Black and whites, Black drivers were 3 times more likely to be subjected to a police search than white people. What's behind the numbers and what's being done to change them?
Art, man, how are you?
That's what 5 young men from the Chauncey Glover Project, a Houston mentorship program, asked Houston Police Chief Art Acevedo.
I have a question, even though this might be a little bit off topic. I did my little research, and the population of Black people and white people being body searched and vehicle searched are different. So Black people there often to get more search. Why is that?
We're looking deeper into that. It depends on whether it's just what we call a consent search, where you're asking somebody for consent. And part of it is because you're making arrests. I've invited in the Center for Policing Equity. They're looking at all of our data, but it's the consent searches that you really have to pay close attention to, because those can be fishing expeditions, right?
Chief Acevedo, a Cuban immigrant, was widely praised for showing solidarity with protesters, but he was also heavily criticized for not releasing sooner police video from the April shooting death of Nicholas Chavez, who had a history of mental illness.
When you hear the phrase defund the police, what is your initial thought the resources and money you all have can be put into issues of mental health, homeless, healthcare, education even? So what is your take on that?
It's a great question, because defund the police means different things to different people. Defund the police, to some people it means abolish the police, that we don't need police. Defund the police to some people means move all this out of the police when there's no system in place to replace the police in it. And so for me, I support the concept of the police should be doing what the police should be doing, and we actually have mental health professionals at our dispatch center. When the call comes in, they're actually sending and referring folks to help without involving the police at all. So we're doing a lot of things, we're just not doing enough of it, and I think that we need to do more of that.
What's up, brother? You remember me, man?
To improve community relations, Chief Acevedo says the department will track officers and hold them accountable for outreach.
We're going to make that relational policing, which is about connecting with people outside of the 911 call, to build those relations. We're developing the policy now and how we're going to track it and enforce it. And I believe that if we did the proper investments in the education, in work programs, and quality housing, and especially in mental health and addiction treatment, then a generation from now, you could reduce the police without a problem. And you're going to be the next generation of leaders out in this community. You need to keep pushing us.
Get my good side.
Get his good side.
There you are. All right, great. Thank you.
All right, proud of you. Thanks for the conversation.
Today we are honored to have with us one of America's most dynamic young leaders. Michael Tubbs became the youngest mayor of a major U.S. city when he was elected mayor of his hometown of Stockton at the age of 26, just a few years ago. He has become not just a great leader, but a role model for students and young people everywhere. He graduated from Stanford University and returned to Stockton to give back to his community, to give back to his community, to give back, to give back, to give back, to give back to his community.
So good to see so many familiar faces. So I'm still getting used to seeing everyone in small boxes on the screen, but happy to be the first black mayor of Stockton. I've made it my mission to be the best mayor of Stockton and to show not just the city, but this country that black people, that young black men can lead and can govern.
How do we get a chance to talk to you, man? I need to set up an appointment.
I remember we were having a conversation about ending the subsidy of city-owned golf courses. And I received emails and phone calls calling me the N-word, calling me a thug, calling me a monkey for trying to be fiscally responsible. A lot of it is rooted in anti-blackness and racism. Like the critiques are not rooted in fact, but that I'm criminal, which plays into stereotypes of black people being criminal.
Mayor Tubbs' story is truly inspirational. With his father in prison, he was raised by a single mother.
Then I think for my dad, in the conversation I had with him when I was 12 and I visited him in prison, he was talking about how for black kids with parents in prison, with young mothers who grew up in poverty, that prison is like a likely option. And that's what people expect of you. So you have to behave differently. Growing up, I made it my mission to have no interactions with police. My freshman year at Stanford, my first month, the then police chief got on TV at a press conference and said, I've instructed my officers to stop every black person they see and then to ask them why are they here? Because they were tenant robberies that happened and 6 of the accused folks were African American.
If my officers see an African American who has a do-rag on his head, absolutely the officers will be stopping and trying to find out who that person is.
So I got 50 of my classmates to go to a Palo Alto City Council meeting. We came with 4 demands, including the resignation of the police chief. Hey, Chief.
Mayor, how you doing?
I'm good, how are you?
Good.
And I think those experiences inform the way I work closely with my police chief now to make it so kids don't grow up feeling like I grew up, that you just don't want to see cops at all.
If we look at the data, we can be more informed on reducing the footprint of over-policing in our neighborhoods.
And I'm lucky that I'm able to do the job with someone I see eye to eye with on the vast majority of issues. And when we do disagree, it's about pace and how quickly things should move, right? And the work we've been doing on gun violence reduction, where we've added different roles besides cop to the equation. We've added case manager, we've added violence outreach worker. And we've seen with adding those roles, we've had a 40% reduction in homicides each of the last 3 years. Because everyone's doing their part. Like cops are doing what they do, but they're not the only solution or tool we have to deal with that problem. And even now the officers will say, no, these strategies are helpful and they are making our community safer.
Yeah, sometimes we laugh and sometimes we cry, but I guess you know now, baby.
I'm proud of the fact that I'm a husband. I'm not a great husband yet. I'm a pretty good one though, I do my best. I'm proud of the fact that I'm a father. Yeah, it's the kitchen. I hope I'll be able to say to him, like, we made so much progress. We've gotten to a place where we don't have racism in the practices of our police department. So you'll be treated just like everyone else. You have no reason to fear. If you look at history, like it's actually incredibly tragic to say this, but despite all the racism, it's probably still the best time in the history of this country to be a black person. Like, think about that. You have people in the streets risking COVID, protesting, saying, my life matters, Black lives matter. And still, it's better than 7 years ago when we could be just lynched. We had law enforcement beating people for trying to vote all those people had a lot more reasons to quit than I do. And they saw a better day that despite the injustices in the world, in terms of the cosmos, the big boss is on the side of justice. I think tomorrow deserves people in today who kind of sees it for what it could be and wants to do everything we can while we're here to make that better for them. And that's what our ancestors did for us.